Today I'm speaking with Riley. Riley, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thank you, Tim. Thanks for having me.
It is awesome to meet you. And Riley is over in London, UK. I don't have too many interviews that I do on a regular basis with people in London, but it's been a minute. But I'm so glad to finally have someone from the UK back and just getting to know Riley together with you all. So I'm so glad to meet you again, Riley. Riley's married and he has 4 kids. He works in the IT field and he grew up as a Jehovah's Witness. I do have some Jehovah's Witnesses interviews I've done. And every time I do them, they break my heart a little bit for some of the things that I come across. But I also love it because I get to learn a little bit more about a part of Christendom that I didn't get exposed to. So I definitely get an education. Before you tell us more about yourself, I want to mention as well that Riley is a YouTuber. He's not as active on YouTube as he is on TikTok, but the handle's the same. So like and subscribe to both. The handle is Jexit, that's Jexit 2020. Jexit 2020. I'll have the links beneath this video, so please like and subscribe. And who knows, he may be picking up the YouTube channel again at some point. But Riley, we're so glad you're here. And if you could, before we get into the meat of your story, tell us a little bit more about yourself and some fun things.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, so my name's Riley. My first name is actually Martin, but I go by my last name, Riley. It's kind of like a family tradition, where all the men in my family get called Riley by their partners. Born and raised in London, in the UK. I've lived here all my life. As you said, I work in IT. I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. Besides that, I'm a huge movie nerd. My brain is like an encyclopedia for movie quotes, sci-fi in particular. Absolutely love sci-fi. And so, yeah, that's pretty much me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. My kids have been getting into Star Wars a little bit, first with the cartoons like the Clone Wars cartoons and so forth. But I've enjoyed those. Do you like Star Wars kind of stuff?
I absolutely love Star Wars. Not so much the newer stuff. I do love Andor. I absolutely love Rogue One, and I really enjoyed The Force Awakens. But everything else, I'm kind of not too fussed about.
Yeah. And it's always amazing how you can really see the differences that the directors make. That just the tone and the vibe is so different based on
Yeah.
who's doing it. So well, we're so glad you're here. Again, I would love to hear your story. What we invite people to do, if you could, is take us back to sort of what you were taught as a kid, what it was like. I'm sure that again there'll be some questions I have because it's so different from what I grew up in. But what was it like, especially in terms of your relationship with Jehovah, with the church, with the Bible, or the New World Translation? And just all the other aspects of it. What were you taught growing up about, the reality of God?
Yeah, so right from the very beginning, my mother was contacted by a JW missionary when I was 2 years old. She studied the Bible with them for the next 4 years and then committed to the religion and got baptized. So I was 6 years old when that happened.
Was she a
So
Christian of any kind before then, or just nominal?
she she was a Christian, but not following any particular religion. I do vaguely remember some memories of going to a church, St. Mary's Church in Peckham, near where I lived. But yeah, very, very vague memories. So we attended church every once in a while, but my mum wasn't really committed to any particular denomination.
Okay. Was your dad in the equation at that point?
Yeah, so my dad wasn't a Jehovah's Witness for much of my childhood, but he studied on and off with Jehovah's Witnesses throughout that time and eventually did get baptized later on. But
Okay.
for most of my childhood, it was just my mother that was in the religion.
Gotcha. Hmm. What was it like growing up as a kid in the JW church?
So, as I'm sure a lot of people know of Jehovah's Witnesses, that there's no celebration of holidays, no birthdays, no Christmas, no Easter, or anything like that. Um, but I didn't feel that I was missing out for not celebrating those things at the time, mostly because my mother went above and beyond, to make sure that we were happy and that we were enjoying our childhoods. And she really did do well at that.
That's awesome.
Now is a different matter. I feel very resentful that I didn't get to experience Christmas and birthdays as a child. I absolutely love them now. I'm a huge Christmas fanatic to be precise. I am sad that I didn't get to experience those things, as a child.
Can I ask just a quick side question? Did you, when you were growing up, did you know that there were other Christians doing it differently, or were you sheltered for the most part?
Oh no, absolutely. We knew it was something that we discussed on a regular basis,
Okay,
but it was always framed that we're the one true Christians. Everyone else is just doing it wrong.
gotcha, gotcha. So it was almost a source of pride, probably.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Hmm. And what's
Yeah.
it like? What is an actual JW church service like? What do you do in the services?
To be honest, I'd say it's very different now from when I was a JW because since I've left, things have changed in the religion a lot. But my memories of growing up as a JW and attending meetings is that it was almost like attending school. There was a huge focus on the academics of the religion, of understanding really deep biblical concepts, being being able to defend your beliefs against other people as and when required. You know, remembering, learning, being able to recite scriptures. Um, it was very, very academic. I mean, we had tests, you know, like how you would have quizzes in school in the US. We had those at the Kingdom Hall. They may still do that. I'm not sure.
Well, that's
Um,
intense.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you can't just go to a JW service like what you hear, say, I want to be a JW and get baptized there and then. I know it's like that in some Christian churches, but it's not like that in the JWs. You have to study for at least a year before you're qualified to be baptized into the religion. And you have to, again, have to have a test
Hmm.
at the end of that process.
Now, how many times would you be in church? Like, what's the time commitment look like?
It was 3 times a week throughout while I was growing up. That did change later on to just 2 times a week. But so yeah, it was two-hour long meetings a week, plus one meeting that was just an hour. And that meeting was held in someone's home. It wasn't actually held in the kingdom hall. The congregation would break into smaller groups and meet in somebody's home for that 1 hour meeting. But that was phased out in the early 2000s, if memory serves.
But there's other parts of the week that are sort of you're sort of locked into the commitment, right? In terms of preparing for that and
Yeah.
witnessing. Is that right?
Witnessing for most families or for people who work during the week, witnessing takes place on a weekend. If you wanted to have the reputation of being super spiritual, you went out on Saturday and Sunday morning on the preaching work. Um, you could get away with going out just on one of those days, but if you wanted to, elevate your reputation, it was two. But every meeting and every activity that you do, you have to prepare for. So that's an additional time commitment. I mean, I often say that Jehovah's Witnesses are the most time deprived people in the world because the commitment to the religion is huge. It's like having another job. In fact, they actually say in the religion that you shouldn't have a career. You should just have a job because your career is being a Jehovah's Witness. Whatever secular employment you do should only serve the purpose to support your religious based activities. So having a career was heavily discouraged and frowned upon, so most Jehovah's Witnesses work very low paying menial jobs.
If you did have a wealthy person come in the church, would that be seen as like a an exception to the rule because of everyone else trying to not be focused on the career but focused on the witnessing part?
Um, it depends. I mean, wealth in itself and having money weren't necessarily seen as bad things. It was what you had to do to achieve those that could potentially be bad, especially if there was a heavy time commitment or if it was things that went against the religion's principles. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So if somebody would say, for instance, had generational wealth and they didn't particularly have to work an awful lot to have or maintain their wealthy lifestyle, that was fine. It was more about the time. What effort do you have to put in to get that wealth, and could that time be better spent out on the preaching work or doing other congregational activities?
Hmm. What was your just jumping ahead here, but what was your contrast in life like when you're going from having all your time consumed by that to later on when you left? Like what was that dynamic like?
Oh goodness me, it was like night and day. When I left, that I literally quite literally did not know what to do with myself. I had so much free time on my hands. I didn't know what to do with it. The days seemed to last forever. The weekends were just endless. I mean, people complain about the weekends going past too quickly. For me, it was the complete opposite. Weekends lasted forever because I just didn't have anything to do.
That's amazing. I'm just a couple more questions here, and I want to get back to your story, but just for sort of a baseline as to what you kind of believed and what was going on. One of the things that we would say a lot as Christians, and I'm sure you've heard this as for the Protestant evangelical side, is that it's not a religion, it's a relationship. Did you feel like in the midst of praying and worshiping and all this and going to all these services and doing all these things, was there a sense of like an internal relationship with God? I mean, I guess I should maybe frame it in two ways. Just how do you, as a JW in that world, how do you get like out of what's the phrase? Get out of jail free card, basically. But like, for us, it was get out of hell. I think JWs believe in annihilation. So it's like if that's true, how do you get out of the bad side of being against God? Being his enemy. How do you get on his good side? How do you have peace with him just to get the relationship kind of started? And then, did you feel that closeness or that joy at all as you were growing up?
Hmm. So within the religion, a lot of emphasis is put on having a personal relationship with Jehovah. The phrase internally is make the truth your own, which means don't do this because it's what's expected of you. Don't do this because it's what your family does or because of what your parents are doing. Do it because you have a strong personal relationship with Jehovah. You love him and you want to please him. So I guess that would be the equivalent of how it is in mainstream Christianity of, it's not a religion, it's a relationship. So that's definitely present, although phrased slightly differently.
But I mean, is there like an
Um,
initiation of like, if you make a profession, like for us, it's if you profess that you're a sinner and that Jesus died for your sins and you accept him as your personal savior, that he died and rose again on your behalf, that is basically the transaction, if I can call it that, that allows God to sort of as the judge in heaven to take his gavel and say, you are covered by the blood of Christ. You are a sinner, but I'm going to declare you righteous, even though you're not righteous. I want to declare it. His righteousness is going to cover you simply because you made a profession of faith. How is that different for a JW? How do you like just start their relationship?
in JWs, there's no such thing. It's a very works-based religion. They don't believe in once saved, always saved. They believe that once you dedicate your life to Jehovah God, um, outwardly express that dedication by means of water baptism, publicly display that dedication. Your name gets written in the book of life, but it's only in pencil. It can always be erased at a later date. You've got to keep on working for the religion, constantly give your all to the religion to keep it there. And only at the end, after you've proved yourself, after Armageddon, does it get written in indelible ink.
That's crazy.
I mean,
Wow.
something that I hear a lot and something that I feel myself after speaking to a lot of ex-JWs is that you never ever feel that what you're doing is enough and you never ever feel that you're good enough. And that's actively, you're actively made to feel that way. You will hear talks at the Kingdom Hall and at the bigger gatherings, the assemblies and conventions. Are you doing enough? Could you do more? You're always made to feel that you're not quite there, that you're falling short in some way.
Hmm. Ours is different, like you said, but I can definitely relate in the sense that you are always, as a Christian, being taught to examine your heart to see where there's pride, and to say that even when you're doing good works, and as a Protestant, I would have said good works are not to be saved. They're simply the evidence that I am saved. They're the follow, and they're the way of me saying thank you to God for giving me the gift of salvation. I don't do good works to earn it, but I do good works to say thank you. But there's still this strong sense of like, yeah, but now that you are doing these good works to say thank you to God for what he's done for you, you really need to be aware that there's this human tendency that you're like, I know I'm not supposed to earn my salvation, but I kind of want to because I want to be seen in a good light. I want to be acceptable.
Hmm.
and
mm,
acceptable in Protestant theology, it's not an option by way of your works. You can't earn your way to acceptability. It has to simply be judicially attributed to you, given to you as a gift that you never could earn. And yet you kind of like, well, I wish I could because I want to be seen as a good person. And so you're like trying to second guess yourself all the time. Am I doing this in the flesh? Am I doing this for pride? And of course the Bible says, don't lean on your own understanding. Don't trust yourself. Your heart is deceitful and desperately wicked. And so you're constantly thinking, I wonder. And there's verses too, I think in the New Testament where Jesus talks about, and I think in Matthew on the Sermon on the Mount, where he says, if you do something, a good deed like prayer or some, your alms, your giving, if you're doing it and you're showing everybody, look, everybody, I'm putting money in the offering plate, that he says, you've just received your reward. Your reward is not in heaven. You just got your reward right
mm,
here, and that's it. Your reward is you wanted the praise of men and you got it. And so you're always second guessing yourself. Am I doing this for the praise of people? And it really does. It puts you in a tailspin, especially when you think, I know my own heart. I know that I do have sin issues and doubts. And you do constantly think, I am failing this God so much. I obviously failed him so much. He had to send his son to die for me. But now when I know what great things he has done for me, this glorious salvation, I'm still kind of acting like this person that's like, you didn't do that much for me. I don't need to transform my life for you. I don't need to give over everything for you. It's like you're my savior, but you're not really my Lord and master. I want to kind of have you as my savior, but I want to still do my own thing or take a little bit of praise. And then when you get convicted, like, oh my God, what did I do? What selfishness am I exhibiting here? And you feel guilty, and it puts you in this spin of like, I acknowledge it, I confess it, I get right with God, and then it happens over and over and over again, and mix in other kinds of guilt and shame too. But it's hard. It's we're not doing it for salvation, but the outcome is the same. You feel like you're a piece of shit.
Yeah. I mean, in the JWs, they pay lip service to the idea of not putting on a showy display of faith for the benefit of other people. But at the same time, and quite contradictory, religion is all about how you look to other people. There are so many cultural rules and, de facto rules about what your conduct or behavior looks like to other people and the effect that that could have on them. They call it stumbling. And it's like one of the worst things you could do as a JW is to stumble somebody else. And you can stumble somebody by doing something that's completely innocent. The religion actually acknowledges this. You could be doing something completely innocent, but if it offends somebody else to the point where their faith is negatively affected by that thing, then you've done something really, really bad. So you're constantly second guessing yourself. You're constantly checking yourself and constantly thinking, is this going to stumble someone? Should I do this? Should I say this? Should I make this joke? Should I wear this garment? Should I watch that movie? You know, should I buy that car even? Is that going to give the impression that I'm materialistic? So you're constantly thinking about what you look like to other people. And, that I guess serves the opposite purpose of what the religion wants you to do, because I have a philosophy that whatever you incentivize people to do is what they will do. If you incentivize people to look good in front of others, that's going to become their main motivation, regardless of what that rule was there for in the first place. So
Mm.
you end up serving other people or serving the perceptions that other people have of you,
Yeah.
even if that's not what you're supposed to be doing.
I definitely grew up with some similar things that I could relate to, and that dynamic really is such a killer. And you,
Yeah.
you feel like you're constantly asking yourself, who's watching me, and there's things too that you would do in private, but once you realize someone's watching, you have to pull yourself back. When I
Mm.
watch this movie or whatever, it's amazing. I think we also saw it a lot with purity culture, where a lot of women were put in the spot of like, if you would wear that, that's fine, but you might, number one, make the men stumble if you're showing too much skin, but then also you might make another woman second guess what she's doing, and it ends up, purity culture is a whole different animal, but a whole different monster, but it comes in so many layers. Now with
Yeah.
all this oppression, did you have though a sense of like closeness and joy of the Lord in your relationship with him?
No, no, that's something that I never ever had. I mean, I grew up with two siblings, an older sister and a younger brother. they ultimately never stayed in religion. They left when they were in their early to late teens, whereas I stayed in a religion right up until the age of 42. And
Wow.
the reason for that is that the religion made sense to me on a mental level, but I never ever felt it in my heart. Ever. There's never a time where I can look back on and say that I had the love for Jehovah or the love for the religion or the love for the lifestyle. It was all because in my mind, I knew it to be the right thing to do. And I was doing it for that reason. Most of my service to the religion was perfunctory. I was going through the motions, just hoping that one day I would get it in here, especially when I compared myself to my mother, who, as the religion would describe as a spiritual giant. You know, she lived and breathed the religion. She was a Jehovah's Witness at her core. You know, that's what defined her. And I was constantly comparing myself to her and coming up short. I felt really, really inadequate throughout my entire time in the religion, but I 100% believed and was convinced that it was the truth, which is why I stayed in it for so long, those, despite that lack of
Mm.
an emotional connection to it.
Did that lack of connection ever lead you to think that you were like an imposter, or at least that you were in danger of not getting into the kingdom later?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It made me feel like there was something wrong with me. I remember speaking about this very same thing to an elder in my congregation once when I was probably in my 30s, and saying that the religion to me feels like you see a job advert, you're looking for a job and you see a job posting and it's like the perfect job. You really, really want this job. But when you look through all the requirements, you realize that you're not qualified. And that doesn't stop you wanting it. And the fact that you want it so badly, but you know you're not qualified makes you really, really sad. And that's how I felt about the religion my entire life.
Well, feels like to use a different analogy, it feels like you're probably wearing a hamster wheel, just trying your
Yeah.
best to move forward and just spinning in your little
Yeah,
circle. That is so
absolutely.
sad. That's really sad. It's I feel I feel torn about whether to say I feel bad that for that experience or good, because I guess in some ways that was probably an early seed for you that something was wrong. Is that fair to say?
Um, Not necessarily that. I mean, that came later.
Okay.
I'd say 2 to 3 years before I left the religion is when I started having serious doubts.
Okay.
And doubts isn't even a very accurate way to describe it. It was more like misgivings,
Yeah.
you know,
Mm.
but not necessarily doubts. I mean, even after I left, I still believed that the religion was the truth for about another year after that. I
Gotcha.
had some serious misgivings about a lot of things that I just could not reconcile.
Yeah. I definitely
Yeah.
want to get to those in just a minute. Can I just ask for before we get to jump back in your story, can you tell us just a clarification of what are the texts that you all use? I know there's the Bible, but they've got their own translation, right? And some other stuff. But for outsiders like myself, what are the texts that you would typically use as an active JW?
So the central text, the holy book of the religion, is the Bible. They have their own translation called the New World Translation of the Holy Scriptures. I don't hold it to be an accurate or academic translation of the Bible at all. I'd say that the religion's doctrine informs the translation rather than the translation informing the doctrine, which in my opinion is the way it should be. They'll disagree with that, of course, but yeah, that's my opinion. Besides that, the religion publishes a lot of books. Not so much in recent years since, you know, the rise of the internet, um, but definitely throughout my childhood, my time in a religion, it was all about books, books upon books upon books. Every annual convention, there was a release of at least two new books, and that's not surprising to me now. I mean, it wasn't surprising to me at the time, but now I look back on it and I think to myself, why couldn't I see it? Because religion started off as a publishing company. The founder of the religion started a publishing company. Even up to this day, the members of the religion aren't called congregants or worshippers or believers. They're called publishers because that's what you are when you're a Jehovah's Witness. Definitely throughout my time in the religion, you are the unpaid employee of a book publishing company. In your preaching activity, you were really just distributing books under the guise of trying to save people. you know, it was all about books.
Mm.
Um, the main journals of the religion are the Watchtower and Awake magazine. Those were the first journals published by the religion. They were called something else right at the beginning. Names have changed over the years. But the Watchtower magazine is positioned as being explaining the Bible. In fact, all of their books are positioned that way. These are just Bible aids.
When you're
They're to aid in your understanding of the Bible.
when you look at those for the parts that are more theological and deep and trying to take you deeper into your faith, did the Watchtower magazines have a sense of consistency, or did they ever like how often do they change their ideas and their rules?
The the religion's doctrines change all the time.
Hmm.
So much so that it's like a doctrine unto itself, which they call New Light. New Light is, I think, in the Mormon religion, they have a similar thing, but they call it progressive revelation. So the idea which they get from a passage of scripture in Proverbs, I believe, Proverbs 18, where it's a man giving some advice to his son, and he says that the path of a righteous man is like a light that gets brighter and brighter. So they take that to mean that at any given time, we never have a complete understanding of the Bible or what it means or what God expects of us. But these are things that he reveals to us gradually over time. So that's how they justify the fact that their doctrines change frequently, and they do change frequently. Sometimes they change one way and then go back to how it was before, and then go back again, flip flop between two different positions multiple times. I mean, that's actually a thing.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So they would say that the fact that their ideas change is evidence that they are being guided to the correct understanding by God. But I'd say the opposite is true. I'd say that that actually undermines their claim to be the one true religion. Because if you're getting these revelations from God, how can they ever be wrong? Is God wrong? Is God giving you false information? Is God giving you the correct information, but you're interpreting it incorrectly? Is God giving you the correct information, but then you're lying and giving a different story? Whichever of those answers is true, it can't be the true religion if that is the answer. It doesn't make any sense.
It's nuts. If I could make a quick parallel, that's one of the things that jumped out at me in terms of Christianity from the version I grew up in, because we would have always said JWs and Mormons are a cult, but we're not. And we would have had lists of, this is why they're a cult and this is why they're so dangerous and so whatever, nonsensical and unbiblical. But one of them was stuff like that. The consistency isn't there. They changed their rules. The Catholics, the same thing. When the Pope speaks from his throne, ex cathedra, the Pope is the spokesperson for God. So, and the conclave, when they come together and they have these big assemblies like Vatican I and Vatican II, they're making these changes to the official doctrine of the Catholic Church. But then when you look, you're like, but it's changing. You're changing what was clearly your doctrine before. It doesn't make sense. But we would have said in our mentality, like, we have this one Bible that's internally consistent, and it's got such amazing like God's speaking, and of course he's not going to contradict himself. It's not full of contradictions, and we would convince ourselves it's not that kind of book. But as time went on, and I was doing my own digging and thinking through it differently, it stood out to me over and over and over that that's not true. And for
Mhm.
example, one of the biggest ones was when Jesus says, "You have heard Moses say this, but I say this," as if Moses was giving you this bad idea, and I, Jesus, am going to correct it and get you on the right course. But Moses didn't actually say it in the truest sense. Moses simply took down the words of Yahweh. And if Jesus is his son, and or they're one, then in that context, it wasn't really Moses, it was God. So it's like God says it here, and here Jesus, who to us was also God, is saying, you've heard it said before, but I want to say the better version. Like, wait a second, you could have just said the better version of, because that was you back then.
Yeah.
Why are you contradicting yourself from the Old Testament? And Paul does it internally in the documents. Don't have anything to do with false idols. In one passage, then he says, "But idols aren't anything, so don't worry about it. Eat the meat." Women should have their head covered when they pray, but their hair is their covering. It's like, well, are you arguing, like, are there literally people who've taken your text and the scribes that are like going to pass it on to make sure that we still have a good copy? Are they weaving in their own interpretation here and kind of clarifying? Did some bishop somewhere decide, I don't like the way we're interpreting this text, let me add some verses and claim it's from Paul, but that'll kind of fix it, or at least balance it out? Like, it sounds like you don't have the same voice here, and that kind of stuff makes me realize, that it's not just JWs or Mormons. Any version of Christianity is a cult. Any version at all.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, like, that's my biggest criticism of the idea of biblical inerrancy, is that the Bible is not univocal. It's not one book with one author speaking in one voice. It was written by many different people over many different time periods for many different reasons and to many different audiences. And when you accept and understand that, all of the contradictions make perfect sense.
Yeah, it really is. And you realize that the people are literally arguing. They probably have pretty intense political agendas, where they're literally fighting
Mhm.
against their enemies within the text itself. It's crazy. Can I ask, going back to your story a little bit more directly, what were some of the earliest seeds that made you think, not necessarily that this is the wrong religion, but just to say that this is going beyond just, I'm not feeling the intimacy, that I'm jealous that my mom had it, jealous that Pastor so and so has it. I wish I was as close to God, but I'll get there. God will find a way to make me feel that way. That sort of generic stuff to the seeds that kind of said there's something else that's separate from that, that's an issue. What were the earliest seeds you remember?
I'd say it started 2 to 3 years, 3 years at the most before I left the religion. Um, it was when I started having serious issues in my first marriage. I was married at the age of 21 to another Jehovah's Witness. We had 4 children together, and the marriage was fraught with problems right from the very beginning. But
Mm.
I'd say about 3 years before my departure from a religion, things started to come to a head, and we jointly and individually sought help for our marital problems from the elders of the congregation. But I started to feel that the advice they were giving us was garbage. I saw it as being completely impractical. Sometimes, in often cases, it actually made things worse. That's when I started saying, that's when I started questioning the wisdom in certain ideas and concepts within religion, specifically relating to marriage. That's when I started questioning the wisdom of that. And I thought to myself, well, if this is wisdom from God and it doesn't work in this particular area of my life, would it be that the wisdom is flawed in other areas of my life as well?
Mm.
You know, that's what really opened the door to me starting to have a faith crisis. It didn't happen all at once. It was an extremely gradual process because even after I left, I believed it was the truth up until about a year afterwards, just over a year. But that's when I started having misgivings. That's when I started questioning and doubting certain things.
It's amazing how everybody's story is so different, and like this little thing here, that little thing there, but it's like that one thing that just gets the ball rolling. Did you did you have a strong hesitation and a fear that, like, okay, this could be the devil, demons whispering in my ear, this could be my flesh trying to get me to be doing it my way instead of God's way? Did you feel that intensity of, like, I can't, this is a slippery slope, and this we know where this leads to apostates, Did you have that fear that kept you real tight, or did you feel the freedom to sort of investigate, at least in your own thoughts, where this leads?
I definitely had that fear. I definitely had that fear. But at the same time, I couldn't gaslight myself into ignoring the things I was experiencing.
Mm.
So what I did was I think this is a common saying in the Mormons, like, put all of those things on a shelf, you know, put them on a shelf. I put them on a shelf and I put them on a shelf. Then eventually the shelf becomes overloaded and then it breaks, it buckles under its own weight. So that's what I did for a very long time. I just put those things on a shelf. Something that I distinctly remember saying to myself is that, okay, I have doubts about this. I have doubts about that. I have doubts about this. This doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. I tried this and it didn't work. Put all of that to one side and ask yourself this question. Do you believe that the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses is the religious group on earth that Jehovah God is actively sponsoring? If the answer to that question is yes, none of the other stuff matters. That's what I would say to myself. And that placated me for quite a while. It didn't mean that the doubts and the reservations were gone. It's just that I relegated them, so to speak.
Yeah.
I deprioritized them. I just held on to that thing is, do I believe that God is actively leading the leaders of the religion I am in? And my answer to that question was always yes.
Mm. It's amazing the things that we can do to put off the inevitable, perhaps maybe is one way to put
Yeah.
it, but just to ignore them. I remember some similar, journeys, parts of my journey, and one of the things that I always had in my mind was that all these doubts that I have, uh, at first it was like this journey to try to say, you need to resolve these issues. Like these are really good questions, but there are other Christians, most likely older Christians, probably even in their 70s, 80s, and 90s that have gone through these same doubts, but they have come to really good answers because their faith has only gotten stronger over time. So what you need to do is be mentored, whether it was directly mentored or just listening to more sermons, reading more quality books and devotionals. But the idea was, dig in. But eventually it actually changed for me. It almost became a source of pride to say, stop asking the questions, because this isn't to me, it wasn't a religion at all, but if you could call it a religion, it wasn't a religion of, if you get all your questions answered, then I'll believe. It was believe and you'll get your questions answered. And
Mm,
you might also not even get them answered until you die. But
mm,
that God was not saying, I need you to be really erudite and academic in your faith. What I need you to do is bow your stupid, arrogant knee at the foot of the cross and say, I'm a sinner in need of salvation, and I'm a poor wretch and a fool in need of God's wisdom. And that God would almost honor the fact that you're coming to him saying, I don't have the answers, and you know what? I don't need them. I just need you. I don't need to have all my questions answered. And it became a source of pride to say, I don't need to keep doing this. I need to
mm,
simply say, you are the Lord. And also I think the thing that helped me a lot, helped in quotes, helped, didn't help, is the concept of just the Christian worldview, seeing God's fingerprints everywhere. It became a source of personal beauty to me. In The Matrix, have you seen that movie?
mm. Yeah.
At the very end of the first one where Neo gets shot and he's dead, and then he
And
comes
he
back to
sees the
life,
code.
sees the code.
Yeah.
That was like that became my Christian worldview. It was like I could see God's fingerprints everywhere. It was like literally like God is like streaming everywhere. God's in charge of this.
I
And I
had exactly the same experience and I used exactly the same metaphor for
really,
years, exactly the same. What you said just now really resonates with me because I did exactly the same thing. But it wasn't about creation or seeing, it was more about answers. Because Jehovah's Witnesses, I don't know if you've ever spoken to an active Jehovah's Witness before when they're like preaching,
I don't think so.
but Jehovah's Witnesses have an answer for absolutely everything. A lot of the answers are garbage, but they at least have an answer. And I remember once I was on my lunch break from work, and I worked not too far from my mother's house. So on this particular day, I decided to go to my mum's house for lunch unannounced. I still had keys to her house, even though I wasn't living at home anymore. So I turned up there, and it was like a full-blown house party going on. So there was a circuit overseer's visit. So a circuit overseer is sort of like a traveling elder or a traveling pastor that served many congregations within a particular district, and he would stay with one congregation per week until he'd gone around the whole circuit. So the circuit overseer was visiting her congregation that week, and she decided to have him and a lot of the full-time preachers at her house for lunch. So I walked into like this big lunch party, and I was sitting down speaking to this circuit overseer, and we were just getting to know each other. And he asked me about my siblings. He said, I've got an older sister and a younger brother. He said, are they still in the religion? I said, no. He goes, so how come they left, but you stayed? And I said to him, the religion, the truth, as they call it, gives me answers. He said, I'm not confused when I look at the world anymore, you know, because I understand why things are the way they are. And I didn't say this to him at the time, but in my head, I was thinking to myself, because when I look out at the world, I can see the code. I can see the matrix code because the religion gave me answers. And I'm a curious person. I hate not knowing something. If I have a question, I want to know the answer. And well, at the time, less so now, but I hated being in the dark. I hated being ignorant of something that was important to me. So when I look at the world and say, why do these wars happen? Or why is crime the way it is? Or why do people treat each other that way? Religion gave me answers for all of those things. And that's one of the things that I clung to. And to me, that was like Neo seeing the code.
Yeah, and it becomes beautiful because you're like,
Yeah,
oh, I get it. The beauty isn't in the answers. The beauty is I have my eyes focused, sort of like Peter when he steps out of the water. Like if I look at the waves, yes, of course I'll sink, but my eyes are focused on him. He will
yeah.
keep me from falling under those waves. And yeah, it's amazing, and it becomes a beauty. And I think the other thing that was sucked me in a lot was you probably haven't heard of this guy, but there's a evangelical Christian music artist named Michael Card. Have you heard of him?
No.
He was in many ways considered one of the most biblical artists, at least when I was growing up. A lot of tight songs that are tightly woven with scripture and theological concepts. But he would talk a lot about two big things that really struck me, and they're biblical. One of them was that this whole thing is a mystery. The gospel itself is a mystery that the old people in the Old Testament, the prophets, didn't know what God was up to. It's a mystery that, yes, the king is coming, but he's not coming the first time to just obliterate everybody. He's coming the first time to save people, and then he'll come back later to be the king. Right now, he's coming to be the savior. He's going to actually suffer. And that was a mystery that even the angels didn't know. And it became this idea of like, but that's also your Christian life is a mystery. It's a mystery. God's ways are higher than ours. The other thing was there's a song he sings about the foolishness of God, and this is, I guess, from First Corinthians, I think, where the foolishness of God, the foolishness of the world is actually wisdom with God. And so the people that are in the world that are thinking in worldly thoughts, they can't actually understand God. You're not going to be able to do it. The natural man can't understand the things of the Spirit of God. And so there was a song I remember where Michael Card even says, "Come be a fool." And he means it in a very positive sense, like come be a fool for God, because if you're willing to be a fool for God, the world may mock you, but you are going to be making the smartest decision of your life, and your foolishness will soon look like the most wise choice you could ever make. There was a missionary. He said, "He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose."
Mm,
And it was this idea of like you're giving up your life for the sake of this beautiful eternity, and it's going to look so stupid. You gave up wealth and you gave up your time, but it's for the kingdom, and your reward will be worth it. And you will look back and say it wasn't even like a sacrifice compared to the reward's going to just, it's like, one day of work, and instead of getting like $200 or $300, you're getting like $10 million for, it's like that's amazing. The risk or the effort to the reward. And when you frame everything in that sense,
yeah.
that you can push all these discrepancies and issues aside for so stinking long. It's so frustrating to look back and say, why couldn't I see it? And for example, I say to myself a lot, even the issue of circumcision, Like that's like a pretty minor issue in the big picture of this whole thing. But like a God who wants to you to cut off the end of little boys' penises, like that that's really weird. That's really weird.
Mm,
And when you look historically, that's straight out of ancient Egyptian religion. They had circumcision, they had Sabbath, they had pork taboo. Like this, it comes right out. It's like, oh, I see where it came from. But whether it came from anywhere else or not, a God who wants you to mutilate your child's genitals is really freaking weird. And it's like, I should have seen the red flags. I should have seen them, you know?
yeah. I mean, I did exactly the same thing. Um, here in the UK, there's this doctor. He's like a celebrity doctor who used to be quite prominent years ago, Dr. Winston. And I used to really love his programs on the BBC. And he did one experiment with children. He was really heavily into children and their physical and intellectual development as they age. And he did one experiment once where he got a bunch of kids, them into groups of under 5 and over 5. And he left them in a room with a small piece of chocolate. And he said, you can have this piece of chocolate now, or you can wait 5 minutes and have a whole bar. And the point of the experiment was to highlight how children at different ages and different stages in their development perceived time. And what it found was that most of the children under the age of 5 opted for the one piece of chocolate now, but the children over the age of 5 waited 5 minutes and got the whole bar. And I thought that was fascinating. And I thought to myself, so thinking long term is a sign of maturity. So I was really self-reflective about that. And I said, if I want to be spiritually mature, I've got to think long term. So anytime that this life now and the world now and the attractive things in the world now, the minute those things start to appeal to me, that's a sign of me being spiritually immature. So when that happens, I need to check myself and, realign and start thinking about long term, because this life now that we're living isn't the real life. The real life is what's to come after Armageddon. So if at any time I start to think, I can't do this anymore, I just want to live a good life now, forget Armageddon, forget the paradise, forget the new world, forget eternal life, that's me being immature, and I don't want to be immature.
Hmm. I've used the illustration too, and I'll use this quick, and then we'll get back to your story of a tapestry. Where someone's using thread, and on the one side it actually looks like a real painting with thread, a very beautiful image, but on the back side it's just random threads. And I often use that illustration like this is going to look like chaos on one side, but someday God's going to flip it. And you're like, oh my gosh, kind of like
Mm,
Job. And
yeah,
Job was like, what are you doing? You're killing my family. You're taking away my stuff. I'm sick. The world's upside down. And then God finally answers him and says, who are you to answer back to God? And, were you there when I formed the foundations of the world? And at the end of it all, when God's done reprimanding Job, Job's answer is just like, oh my God, I've been so wrong. I'm just gonna put my hand over my mouth. He looks at him, I'm gonna put my hand over my mouth. Like I'm just so wrong. And you feel like as a
yeah,
Christian, when you're judging God, you're like, I am so wrong. And I know in my heart I'm gonna be wrong because God can do no
mm,
wrong. When he flips that tapestry, I'm just be like, wow, what an
yeah.
amazing God you are. Well, can you take us into more specifically, like what was the journey like to get to the point where you actually said to yourself, this might not be ultimate reality?
Yeah. So to start that part of my story, I guess I've got to go back to January 2019. The problems in my relationship came to a head and we ultimately separated in January of 2019. I was immediately homeless, spent 2 months living in my car. The reason for that is that, so within, within the religion, divorce is only permitted on the grounds of adultery. Separation without divorce is permitted under some very specific circumstances. None of those circumstances applied to us. It was my choice to separate. I didn't have what the religion calls scriptural grounds. So I didn't want my guilt to affect anybody else, because they have this thing of collective guilt. If you actively support somebody in an unscriptural course, then you can suffer the negative consequences of that. So
Mm.
there was no one else that I could stay with. You know, all of my friends and family, well, not all of my family, but all of my friends were Jehovah's Witnesses, and I didn't want to taint them with the unscriptural course that I was taking by separating from my wife. I mean, I felt that I had absolutely no choice but to separate, and I'm glad that I did, but I didn't want anyone else to suffer, a bad reputation in their respective congregation for the choice that I was making. So I couldn't live with anyone else.
Mm.
Aside from that, financially, I wasn't in a position to be able to rent an apartment or rent a room somewhere else because I was accused of a lot of things when my marriage ended. I was accused of a lot of things that I didn't do. One of those things was failing to provide financially for my household, which wasn't true. I didn't want to add fuel to those accusations by changing the financial contribution that I made to the family home. So I said, okay, I'm going to move out, but my financial contribution to the household is going to remain the same. If it changed at all, even by £1, I know that that's going to add fuel to the accusation that's already on me that I'm not contributing financially. And I don't want to do that. So I had no choice but to be homeless because I couldn't afford to pay rent on two places of living. So I was homeless for 2 months until I got physically sick. I mean, I was not prepared for not just the physical, but the emotional toll that being homeless was going to take on me. And I ended up getting sick. What I would do is I was a member of a 24-hour gym. I'd park my car at night near the gym, use the gym's facilities to wash and bathe, sleep in my car. In the morning, I would go in the gym, do my workout, get ready for work. All my clothes were in the trunk of my car. Then I would go to work, come back to my car and do the same thing over and over again. Until it got too much for me. I got physically sick. And then my mum said to me, okay, you've got to come and live with me now. Forget all of the other reasons why you didn't want to come and live with me in the first place. Now your health is at stake. So you've got to come and live with me, which I was very, very grateful for. So I went and lived with my mum. That lasted for just over 2 months until I was excommunicated or disfellowshipped from the religion. At that point, my mum said, well, if you're disfellowshipped, you can't live here because of the shunning policy. She eventually changed her mind about that. But then I went on vacation. I went to the US to spend some time with my cousin, and I'd met my now wife by that time. We were in the early stages of dating, and she's American as well. She's from Kansas. So when I went to the US to vacation with my cousin, I met up with my partner there as well. But when I came back, everything between me and my mum had changed. So the elders of her congregation had visited her while I was away, and they basically said, your son's been disfellowshipped. He's not making any efforts to gain reinstatement into the religion. While he's living in your house, that's going to reflect on you negatively. You're going to lose your standing in the congregation if he continues to live here. So
Wow.
my mum basically gave me 3 weeks to find somewhere else to live.
That's
So,
crazy.
yeah. So I left her home and I haven't seen her since. That was in June of 2019.
So
And,
she's prohibited from really interacting with you at this point
yes,
because of that.
she texts me when she absolutely has to, when she has no other choice.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's
Um,
that part of it's got to be one of the most heartbreaking parts of this. Like, I mean, how do you
yeah.
even wrap your mind around that?
Yeah, it's crazy. it's crazy. There was one time where I had my nephew and his family over to my house for dinner. My nephew's not in the religion. Yeah, so we were eating dinner, watching TV, having a good time. I was playing with his kids, and then his daughter FaceTimed my mum, her great grandmother. So she was talking. They were, having a good conversation. And my nephew's daughter, she calls me Uncle Monster for reasons that I won't go into. It's very cute. So she says she's speaking to her great grandmother, and she says, "Oh, Nanny, we're at Uncle Monster's house. Do you want to talk to him?" So she points the phone at me, and I get a glimpse of my mum. We make eye contact. She jumps out of the way of the camera just so she doesn't have to look at my face.
Well,
And the thing is, her phone, well, I don't know about now, but the phone that she was using at the time is a phone that I gave to her. And I gave it to her after she got disfellowshipped. I couldn't physically give it to her in her hand because that means we would have to have had person to person contact. So she said to me, when you bring the phone, leave it inside the porch and then ring the doorbell and then leave. And then I'll know that it's there. So I had to deliver the phone to her that I was giving to her that I didn't have to. I was giving it to her because she lost her own one. She was willing to accept it from me, but I had to leave it in her doorway like an Amazon delivery driver just so that she didn't have to have that one-to-one contact with me because that would have broken the rules.
hmm.
Yeah.
These rules of the disfellowshipping and shunning are just so intense. Everything from obviously the JWs and other groups like the Amish, where they literally turn their backs on people physically.
Yeah.
It's so heartbreaking. I interviewed a JW pretty early on in the life of this channel, and the gentleman, he's over in New Zealand, but he said, when he left, his son, I think, was like in his late teens, and his son had to basically walk away from his own father, but like his son is now an adult and got married and has his own kids, and so like this dad who's now a granddad, he can't even see his kids or his grandkids because of
Mm.
this. It's the intensity of it. I wish people could step back and you just want to shake them a little bit gently, like, do you not see what you're doing? Like,
Yeah.
you're,
Yeah.
I mean, number one, you're not bringing us any sense of like, yeah, this is the true religion because it's so loving and so gracious and so kind. You're making us think this is stupider than ever and more poisonous than ever, more toxic than ever. But you're destroying families. I mean,
Exactly.
it's just that's insane to me. I mean,
Yeah.
I get it in one sense. If people want to say, I gotta say, I completely disagree with your worldview. But to not be able to even see you, like, there's especially with your parents, there should be
Mm.
some sense of being able to have that connection to say, I at least got to give you a hug. I
Yeah.
mean, to me too, if
Exactly.
you really believe God is love, why would you not want the love of your parents to be there? And as an elder, why would you not want your parents to extend that love and be like, I mean, even the prodigal son, his dad is just waiting there with open arms, like, come on, son, come on home. I'll take, we'll forget, everything's forgiven.
Yeah.
But instead, it's
Exactly.
just the pure silence.
Yeah.
I'm so
Yeah.
sorry for what you've been through.
Yeah. 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 So it's summer of 2019. I move out of my mom's place. By this time, my wife and I are going through like legal separation. So, and the job that I had at the time was really, really well paid. In between leaving, the marriage and moving out of my mum's place, I found a new job and it was really, really well paid. So I had a lot more money to be able to do that kind of thing. And, I was in a new relationship as well, which brought me a great deal of happiness. Then I ended up losing that job, um, which made me panic for a little while. But then I found another job that wasn't as well paid, but it was a lot more flexible. It was, 100% remote. There were no standard hours. I could literally just log on and do the job whenever I wanted. So I said, forget this, I'm going to go traveling. So, um, my partner and I, we went traveling around the United States for 3 months and it was just glorious, the entire trip. I reconnected with a lot of non-JW family members, many of whom I was meeting for the first time, and they really embraced me, welcomed me into, or re-welcomes me into the family, and they completely embraced my partner as well. Absolutely loved her. We had a great time. Then we came back to the UK in early 2020. Soon as we got back, COVID. COVID hit. And that was a huge turning point for me, particularly with my connection to the religion, because I saw it as doomsday prophecy coming true. And I was having nightmares every single night. I was terrified when I was asleep because of the nightmares. I was terrified when I was awake because I thought this was heralding the apocalypse, you know,
Hmm.
to look out the street. I mean, I lived in a really busy area of London at the time. There was constant activity 24/7, very loud. Look out in the street and see no one, to see empty streets and to not hear a single sound. The feeling, I can't even put into words how disturbing and unnerving that was for me at the time. And I started to, because as a disfellowship person, as someone who's been excommunicated from a religion, it's for all intents and purposes, it's a death sentence. Because what defines Jehovah's Witnesses is their belief in an oncoming Armageddon. That's what defines the entire religion. Everything they do, everything they believe serves the purpose of surviving that apocalypse. And being somebody who's been actively removed from the religion means that when that apocalypse comes, you are dead. You're going to be executed by God. He's either going to send a fireball to blow you up, you're going to open up the ground so that it swallows you, or he's going to send an angel to run you through. But whichever form your execution takes, you are going to die. So I was living on borrowed time as far as I was concerned. Even though I wasn't in a religion anymore, I still 100% believed that. And, but more than dying, what frightened me the most is the people who would blame me for their deaths. Because it's something that many people may not know is that when Jehovah's Witnesses go around doing the preaching work, they're not just trying to save the lives of the people they preach to. They're trying to save their own. Because there are scriptures in the Bible that they interpret as saying that if they don't do that, they are going to die. There's a scripture that says, if I condemn a wicked man to death, he will die for his own wicked ways. If you don't warn him about his wicked ways, then I will ask his blood back from you. So Jehovah's Witnesses are constantly in this state of fear that if they don't preach enough, the people that they could have preached to who die, their deaths will be on them. So I'm thinking to myself, I literally had nightmares of all of my non-JW friends and co-workers and family knocking on my door, beating down my door and saying, we are going to die now and it's all your fault. This pandemic that's happening is the start of the apocalypse. We know that God is doing it. We know we're going to die, but it's your fault we're going to die because you didn't bring us into your religion. And I would have this dream constantly. And I was also worried that when the end did come, that my new partner would blame me too. And that tore me up. It tore me up.
So she was a JW as well?
No, she wasn't.
Okay.
It wasn't. She'd never been a JW. But I thought that when we can see that fireball coming from the sky, coming towards us, I thought that in that moment, she would hate me. She would
Hmm.
blame me and she would say, you could have prevented this. You could have
Can
prevented this.
can I just say that like the thing that we're all thinking pretty much almost all the time these days, religion is a mind job. This thing
Yes,
messes with your mind so
it
bad.
does. 100%.
Hmm.
But there was one night after, I had a nightmare. Or, no, I couldn't sleep. So I did what I hadn't done in a really long time, and I prayed. I prayed to Jehovah, and I said, told the story so many times now. I prayed to Jehovah, and I said, this woman beside me has shown me more love, more compassion than you ever have in the entire 42 years that I served you. Said, if you offered me right now the chance to come back into the fold and avoid this oncoming doom and attain everlasting life, but all I had to do to achieve it would be to give her up, I wouldn't take it. Said, I wouldn't take it. Said, you've got nothing to offer me. Said, if I've only got 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, or 5 years of life left, that time is with her, that is infinitely more valuable to me than whatever you could offer me right now. And then I said amen, and then I went to bed. And then because I was so angry at God at that, I mean, I know it's a charge that's levied at atheists a lot, is that you're just angry at God. I'm not angry at God now because I don't believe he exists. But when I did believe he existed at that time, I was very, very angry because I was brought up to believe that God was a God of justice. And I was brought up to believe all these things, all these positive things about him. But my experience of the last year or so didn't match up with what I was taught about him. And that made me very confused. It made me very bitter, very angry, and very resentful, which is why if he had made that deal with me, I wouldn't have taken it. And then the next night, I had a nightmare about dying at Armageddon. And I woke up and I said, I've got to speak to Marsha. That's my wife's name. I said, I've got to speak to Marsha about this. So I woke her up. I said, I'm really, really sorry to wake you up, but there's something I need to talk to you about. I said to her, do you believe that I love you? She said, yes, of course. I said, do you know how much I love you? She said, yes, of course I do. And I said, no, you don't. I said, you don't. I've sacrificed my life to be with you. And then I went on to explain to her how that was true, is that I would rather die with her in the next few weeks and go back to the religion and have the chance of living eternally in a paradise. And I said, that's how much I love you. I would choose you over that. And she was just overwhelmed because even though I know that what I was thinking at the time was all BS, I fully believed it at the time. And I made that choice believing it, you know? So I explained all of that to her and I said, we don't have long left. We're not long for this world, right? But when the end finally does come, please, it would break my heart if you hated me in those final moments. Please don't hate me, you know? Um, and then the next day we spoke again and she convinced me to go to therapy, speak to someone about what I was going through because I was literally scared all the time.
It's insane the things that this does to our mind and our psychology and our emotions.
Yeah.
So, as you're starting to go to the therapist, I'm assuming it was not a JW therapist, but as
No.
you're starting to go to a therapist, what was that? What triggered you to like? What got you to the point of like, if you were to say, I use this illustration for myself, like if your deepest core beliefs of your worldview is this set of dominoes that are stacked up, and
What
you're
was
a
the first
you're a
domino?
mile away, and
Mm.
like so you're like things don't sound right, but you're taking these micro steps, but you're just not close enough yet to actually kick down the dominoes.
Mm.
What were those last final steps that got you close enough to kick down the dominoes of your worldview and actually like say this worldview of JWs and Jehovah, this does not make any sense. This is not real.
So funnily enough, it was a t-shirt.
Nice.
A really interesting story. So, Marsha and I are in London. Marsha overstayed her visa by a couple of months because of the lockdowns and the pandemic and the airports being closed. She wasn't able to return to the US. But when everything started to open up again, she managed to get a flight back to the US. It was the day that I went with her to the airport and said goodbye. When I was traveling home on the bus, I was just doom scrolling through Facebook. And do you know how, I don't know if you're on Facebook or if you're familiar with it, but it will show you every now and again, it will show you a memory that you posted years prior on that day.
Yep.
So I came across one such memory and I was just looking at the comments for nostalgia purposes because all the people that commented on this memory are all JWs and they are all shunning me and I haven't seen them now for years. So I'm looking through the comments and then I come across one particular comment and this person, my former friend, had changed her profile picture to just a t-shirt. I thought, that's strange. I wonder what that t-shirt says. So I tapped on it so that I could see a bigger picture of the t-shirt to see what the slogan on the t-shirt was. And the slogan was apostate. In big letters, it said apostate. And then underneath it had a definition and it said somebody who refuses to be controlled or who thinks for themselves or words to that effect. And then I looked at, started scrolling through the posts on her profile and it was all of this anti-JW stuff, all of these memes. And, I started shaking, started panicking because being raised as a JW, you're taught to have an irrational fear of apostates. They are like, in the hierarchy of evil, it goes devil, demons, apostates. Literally like that. You're taught to fear them. They're the closest you can get to demons in human form. So seeing that my former friend, who, as far as I knew up until this point, was still a JW, seeing that she'd now left the religion and was an apostate, I was terrified. So I quickly closed down the app. But that stuck in my head over the next few days. It stuck in my head. I was like, why would somebody be an apostate and be proud of the fact that they are apostate? Why even would someone self-identify as an apostate? Because to me, the word apostate was like a slur. It's not something that apostates called themselves. It was our word for denigrating them, you know? So it stuck in my head and I couldn't understand. And then one day I decided that I had to have an answer. I had to have an answer to the question, why would someone call themselves an apostate? Why would they not see that as a bad thing? So I opened my laptop, I went onto Google and I started Googling, trying to find out what these apostates were about. Long story short, I came across an ex-JW channel on YouTube called Apostate Chick. The channel's not active anymore, but the first video that I watched on her channel made more sense in that the video was like 7 to 15 minutes at the most. It was about the prohibition on birthdays and why it doesn't make any sense from a biblical perspective to ban birthdays. That video made more sense than anything I'd heard in the Kingdom Hall in the 42 years prior.
Well,
And it was literally like somebody had removed a blockage out of my brain. And then I just watched another one and another one and another one. And I just binged watched the entire channel. And then I discovered other XJW channels. Within 2 weeks, the religion was done, completely debunked in my mind. I was like, that question that I mentioned earlier that I kept on asking myself, do you 100% believe, are you convinced that the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses are being led and guided by Jehovah God? That was the first time I asked myself that question, and the answer was no. I no longer believe that. And because I was able to answer no to that question, that enabled me to chuck the religion in the bin. That was it. I was done.
hmm.
And that was in June of 2020, which is why I called my channel Jexit 2020, because that was my exit from the Jehovah's Witness religion. It was in the year 2020. And it was also when I could see clearly with 2020 vision for the very first time.
Hmm. That's an amazing story. And that's really amazing. And I love how it came to such a head so quickly for you with those videos, um, where you were able to just take all these things that were probably some of them arguably already there in the back of your head, but to give yourself that freedom, when you have that freedom to say, in addition, maybe this worldview is completely true, which I've always thought, but maybe it's not. And because we're so indoctrinated into thinking we have the truth, no one else does, and we know that we're sure that we're in the right religion and the right interpretation with the right book. When you have that perspective, you really can't make a decision about whether or not
No,
this is the right one. I mean, I remember reading even books called one was called "Don't Check Your Brains at the Door." It was encouraging Christians. You can be a Christian without being foolish, without being nonsensical. We have good reasons for this faith. But
yeah,
there was still like this default of like, but you know that whatever investigation you come up against, whatever questions you'll land back right here where you started from. Jesus is Lord, the gospel is what saves you. And God is on his throne, and you will have to pay homage to him one way or the other. You will either bow the knee in gratitude for him being your savior, or you will bow the knee as he punishes you.
yeah.
Either way, he is the judge, and you better be right with him. And like when you have that default, like that's ultimate reality, and that's the future you have to deal with. You can't really get out of that. You can't really ask yourself honestly, is there any chance? And I remember, if I can mimic your 2 weeks that you just described there, mine came to a little bit of a tighter time frame. It was literally a day. It was like an hour. But I kept on saying to myself, this doesn't make sense. Something's wrong here. And I had probably 1,000 reasons to have already left. But it was the end of September of 2019. And I literally just said to myself, is it possible that this isn't real? It's like, no, that's not possible. And my immediate thought was, that would require, if this wasn't real, what that idea would require is that millions of people, of Christians, millions of us for 2,000 years have all been deceived en masse. There's just too many people to have, more of us would have seen through the lies by now. There's no way. But then I immediately thought, well, we believe the Muslims are deceived en masse.
Mm,
You know, all the other religions, the people that follow the Hindu religions and, Asian religions, like they're all mass deceived, millions of them, billions of them over time. They're all wrong. They didn't wake up and realize the truth. Like, why couldn't we have also been deceived this long and not woken up to see the truth? And I was just like it was like a drum beat. It's like, say it, say the words, say it. It's not real. And I tell
mm,
you, as soon as I gave myself the freedom to say it, like, it's not real, it
yeah,
instantly was like, that makes more sense of all of my life than all these other attempts that I did while I was a Christian. This makes more sense to simply say, this isn't real. Christianity is a mythology based religion. And as soon as I said it, I was like, snap.
yeah,
I'm the sucker in the room. I got suckered by this religion
yeah,
for 43 years. I was
yeah.
like,
And
wake up.
I mean, over my life, people have often said to me, you're so intelligent, you're such a logical thinker. How could you have believed this for so long? And even when I was in it, people would say similar things to me. But and I even ask myself that question from time to time. But how I answer that is, so a friend of mine told me a story once. I mean, she was a professional nanny and she was looking after this child and she was pregnant. And the child said to her, "Why is your belly so big?" She said, "Oh, because I'm pregnant." And then he said, "Oh, what does that mean?" So it means I'm going to have a baby. I've got a baby in my belly. So he goes, "Oh," he goes, "when I eat a lot of ice cream, my belly gets big because it's full of ice cream. Did you eat a baby?" It's really, really funny, and obviously the child is wrong, but the child's not illogical. It's a logical conclusion for a child to come to when you think about access to not to knowledge that the child currently has. So it's very possible and reasonable even for a person to be grossly wrong At the same time, be logical and sensible if they have incomplete or erroneous information. So that's how I reconcile being a logical thinker and an intelligent person, but at the same time, falling for this nonsense because I didn't have access to all the information. And some of the information that I had was false. And when I started reading researching the religion, it made sense to me as to why researching Jehovah's Witnesses outside of the publications of the religion is so heavily frowned upon. It made sense to me now why that is the case. Because one of the first things that you're told when you start studying with Jehovah's Witnesses is don't Google Jehovah's Witnesses. Or in times past, before Google was a thing, don't research the religion outside of the religion's own sources. When I started doing that, it made perfect sense to me as to why they say that. Because that's how you get access to the complete information.
Mm. It is amazing how they would do that. I mean, I think JWs are really aggressive, in that much more than I would have experienced in my time. But I think that a lot of other Christians would effectively still get there. They wouldn't quite frame it that way. But what they do is they poison the well. Like these liberal theologians, they've sold out their theology to the devil. These scientists that preach evolution, they're basically like the devil's in these scientists' head telling them to say evolution's real. They
Mm.
poison the well so much that you're like, I felt like I had access to probably any information I could have gotten. I wasn't told don't research stuff, but I knew I didn't need it. I knew it was the work of devils and it was the work of godless people that didn't have the true information and their motivation was purely selfish and godless. And so when you poison the well, you get to the same conclusion. Like everyone else's information is ridiculous and irrelevant. And yeah, it keeps you. And it really is when you step back from this stuff and you realize that we're all just telling stories that are variations of a mythology based worldview, you realize as sort of a post mortem that we as humans are so capable of self deception and we're so willing to indoctrinate, especially our own children, but the world. And it's like the whole thing is so fragile that you ask a few good questions and it just crumbles, the whole house of cards. But we're so fragile and we're so terrorized, I think, by the idea of like, well, if this religion isn't real, then what you're saying is maybe I don't go somewhere when I die, and therefore maybe there's not a transcendent morality and a transcendent anything. And maybe it sort of leads to a sort of some level of nihilism. It's like maybe my life doesn't have an actual meaning and purpose beyond just what I give it today. And for so many people, that thought is so terrorizing to them, they cannot take it. The idea I won't see, Grandpa so and so that already passed. I'll never see him again. Like they just the whole 9 yards, they can't do it. The
Yeah,
idea that you are an evolved animal that has a few years and you're done, and your life didn't really have any purpose beyond the few years you had here, and that's it. There's no afterlife. That terrorizes us so much. And
yeah,
Christian, it's like but you grieve it sometimes as a deconstructing, deconverting person because you're like, I thought I had it. I thought it was real. But when you really realize you were just sold a fake check, someone said, here's a lottery ticket. I can vouch for it. If you go to the store down there, they're going to tell you this lottery ticket's going to win you $1 trillion. But for that moment that you think you've got that much money in your hands, and then you realize, oh, later this is actually just deception. The deception is real. The pain is real, but you have to pull yourself back and say, it's a fake, pretend, uh, orchestrated deception and a sadness because you didn't actually ever have that. You never had an afterlife. And if you grew up thinking, I have this one beautiful life to live and to bless my family and love on them, take care of them, and to make beautiful memories and take care of my body if I can, and to just live this life and just be glad for the time I've got here, you wouldn't be wringing your hands like, oh my goodness, this is such a loss. I'm so terrorized that I won't go to heaven
mm.
someday. You'd just be so grateful for your day. And
Yeah,
the joy of the Lord, the joy of Jehovah, would be replaced by just the joy of rationality and the joy of life and the beauty of intimacy and things like that. And it's just like they took away your ability to enjoy your one short life. I mean, pardon me
exactly,
for saying it, but sometimes you just feel like you want to love me, like you fuckers, you took my life away. It's wrong.
exactly.
You stole my
Yeah,
life. I want it
yeah,
back now.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I relate to so much to what you said just now, because even after I woke up to the indoctrination of the religion and that it was false, for a while I described myself as being spiritual but not religious, and I didn't go straight from not believing in Jehovah's Witnesses to being an atheist. That wasn't an overnight transition for me. Um, but what what facilitated that transition is that I would rather have an uncomfortable truth than a comforting lie. 100%. And I thought to myself that not not liking the consequences of something being true is not good enough reason to deny it, you know. So if there is no God and there is no afterlife, and you know, that means that life has no predetermined purpose, and when I die, there's going to be nothing. Just because I don't like those answers doesn't make the answers false. It's like if I was sick and I went to the doctor and the doctor said, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but you've got stage 4 cancer. I don't want to have stage 4 cancer. Stage 4 cancer means I'm going to die. I don't want to die. I don't like the idea of dying of stage 4 cancer. Therefore, I don't have stage 4 cancer. That makes no sense. That makes no sense. You can't say that, you know, there is an afterlife, there is a God, my life does have a predetermined purpose, just because you don't like the implications of those things not being true. What I like, what I prefer is irrelevant to reality, you know? So that's what enabled me to make that transition to trying to hold, because me trying to hold on to some kind of faith after I stopped believing in the JW religion, that was only for reasons of wanting to be comforted. It had nothing to do with what reality or rationality dictate. It was only because I wanted to be comforted. In the stage that I was at my life at that time, that kind of made sense because of everything that I had been through. But at the end of the day, I want to live in the real world. You know, I value reality a lot more than hope and optimism. And I'm not being judgmental against people for whom that is not the case. You know, hope and optimism are good things, and some people prioritize those things over truth. Who am I to tell them that they shouldn't? But for me personally, that isn't the way that I wanted to live my life.
Hmm. Yeah, that concept that the unexamined life is not worth living.
Mm,
It's yeah, it's I completely agree, and it's at the end of the day, you realize um, my addiction to deception is truly ruining my life. It is at a certain point
mm,
you have to say that it's not even like just about my life in terms of my experiences and what I do and my choices. It's like I literally have never come to a point of knowing who I am. Like I don't know who I am. I am nothing so far, at least at that point in the story. I'm nothing except what the religion told me I was.
mm,
And I love going back to the Matrix, how, Neo says what, when they pull him out of the water, when he first escapes the Matrix, and he says to Morpheus, "Why do my eyes hurt?" And he says, "You've never used them before." And it's
mm,
like, you have never seen the universe or even yourself for real. Like this
yeah,
isn't your time to say what I want to do with the time I've got left. This is the time to start over. You are now a baby human again in a
exactly.
real strong sense. And can I just ask? I know we've gone through a lot here, and I've kept it for a while, but could I ask for maybe steering us toward a wrap up? This is a hard transition in someone's life, and it's especially difficult in someone's life when they've got the shunning that's going on, the disfellowshipping that you went through. Can you give a word of advice, maybe encouragement if you can, but a word of advice at least for someone that's going through the hardest part, where they're just saying, "My life as I knew it is over," and man, oh man, is this is killing me. I feel like there's no future. I feel like basically my life is over at this point because I can't go back to what I was, but I feel like I also can't go forward because if I go forward, everyone's going to hate me and my life will never be the same again. And perhaps they're also looking at things like I don't even have a secular friend to go live at their house. Like I'm now going to be homeless because literally all my friends are JWs. This is just life is spiritually and practically over. It's so depressing. Those people don't know what you and I know, which is that experientially it does get better. So go put
Mhm.
yourself back in those shoes. What advice would you give to somebody going through that part of it?
It's never too late to start living. It is never too late to start living. It's not about how long you've got left. It's about what you do with the time that you've got left. You know, it reminds me of this comedy skit I saw once where there was this dishonest mechanic who was working on a car, and his boss was trying to put together a bill for the customer. And he says, "How long did you work on that car?" And the dishonest mechanic says, "3 days." And then the boss said, "Well, that car only came in yesterday." And then the mechanic goes, "Yeah, well, I work fast."
Nice.
You can live fast because in the 6 years that I've lived since leaving the religion, I've lived more than the 42 years prior. I've squeezed 42 years worth of living into 6. It's never too late to start living. It's not about how long you've got left to live. It's about how you live it. And to the world, to a Jehovah's Witness, the world to a Jehovah's Witness is very, very small. It's very small. You live in a bubble. They don't realize they live in a bubble because they're not physically isolated in terms of geography. They live and work amongst other people who aren't in their bubble. But mentally and perceptually, they are in a bubble. So their world is very, very small. But once you come out of that and you actually experience life and everything that life has to offer, you realize that this world is huge. It's huge. The possibilities for fulfillment and enjoyment and achievement are almost endless. Almost endless. You could live a rich life for 80 years and only scratch the surface, you
Mm,
know? So that's what my advice would be. It's never too late to start living.
I love it. What's that Latin phrase? Carpe diem, seize the day.
Yeah.
I love too how, if I can piggyback off what you said, how a lot of times too, as you do get healed and reconnected to yourself and reclaim your identity and start to build a new community, which takes time. But
Mm,
as you do get to a certain point, you see time and reality so differently. And one of the things that I've noticed a lot for myself and a lot of other people in my community is that it turns you into like more of a philosopher poet than you've ever been before.
yeah.
And even people that would say, "Oh, I'm not a poet. I'm not that artistic, whatever." It's changes you, and somehow you become more of a poet, even if it's not literal like writing poetry. Maybe you're creating art in some way, or you create something, but you become more creative. It brings something out of you that says, I am more than what's happened to me. Yes, I'm a victim, but I'm not just a victim, but I am alive. And it's I know that no one's listening out there in the universe in the grand scheme, but I'm going to scream as if someone was listening. I am here, and while I'm here, I'm going to make my mark, and it's going to be beautiful beyond
Yeah.
words. And it turns you into that philosopher poet, and it takes your breath away almost to think about the beauty, especially when you look at the ways that you can influence other people, especially your own children and so forth. It gets very, very beautiful and almost too intense. And I remember that expression, "You're an old soul." Have you ever heard that expression?
Yes.
You're an old
Yes.
soul. You suddenly feel like
Yeah.
you're an old soul, because you feel like you've lived essentially two lives. You feel
Yeah.
like you had a life,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
lived and you died, and now
Yeah.
you've kind of reincarnated in a sense. But you've lived your life, and it came to an end, and now you've started a second life, and you're remembering your old life. But even sometimes you get so far removed from it, you almost forget it. Like, oh yeah, I used to think that was me, but when you thought that stuff, that was like everything to you. But you get so far removed from it, you almost forget it that it ever even happened, and you forget even the relationships and the people and the memories. But then they come flooding back at times, and you put yourself back in their shoes, and you're like, I have truly lived two completely different lives. I'm an old
Yeah.
soul in that sense, and that makes you profound. It makes you step back and say, I got to find some words to figure out how to describe what's happened to me, because
Yeah.
this is the real deal, and this is intense in a way that as intense and beautiful and amazing and transcendent as I thought Christianity or Jehovah's Witnesses, as much as I thought that was the real deal, and that was so intense and transformative, this experience, as untranscendent as it is, in some ways feels more intense and real and raw than anything I experienced in Christianity. And I got to find some way to, number one, describe it, and number two, make it beautiful. Like, pursue the beauty, but even if it's not beautiful already, create beauty out of the ashes. And that
Hmm.
verse where it says, God will restore the years the locusts have eaten. You get that sense that it's like there's no God doing that, but I'm going to restore the years that the locusts have eaten with my life. This is going to be epic. This is going to be epic.
Hmm.
Whether people want to call me an apostate and disfellowship me or not, my life is epic, and I will make waves, and I will also. It gets more beautiful when you realize I can help other people to escape and to reclaim their lives too. And it's just like, holy smokes, what in the world has happened here? This is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's how I define spirituality now. Because in the JW religion, spirituality, what they call spirituality, is nothing of the sort. It's literally just being religious, you know. And I was religious, but I thought I wasn't spiritual because I didn't have that emotional connection to the religion. I didn't see myself as being a spiritual person, but I was very religious. But JWs call spirituality doing these ritualistic things over and over again, working hard for the organization, spending effort, spending time, even spending money. They see all of those things as being spiritual, but it's not. It's not. Now, when I see the positive impact that I have on the people I love around me and seeing the beauty of the world and being awe-inspired by those things, that fills that spiritual void that I never ever had in the religion. And I feel like I'm a more complete person because of it, you know? So leaving the JW religion doesn't mean that you have to lose a part of yourself. It doesn't mean that you have to lose your spirituality. It might mean that you have to reframe it or redefine it, but it's not a loss.
Right.
For me, it was a gain because I never had it in there, but I have it out here on the other side, you know?
It's an amazing journey, and it is. And when you get to that point where you reframe spirituality the way on your terms, the way you want to, without anybody saying you have to, go in this way, and if you don't, there's going to be hell to pay or whatever. When you just have that freedom to explore your life and to reclaim it, man, is it
Yeah.
amazing. I remember the first time that I literally looked up at the night sky for the first time when I was completely escaped. And I just like, I can look up at the night sky and I don't have one single ounce of thought that Yahweh made that or that Jesus is
No.
up there. It's just a big ass sky. And it is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's so immense and I'm so tiny and my life is so precious to me for this moment. And it takes your breath away, both in terms of your shortness of your life and the smallness of our being. But at least you're like, but I'm alive. Like for the first time, I'm truly alive, and it is an amazing journey. It's definitely redefine spirituality in your own terms. It's such a precious thing. Well, I appreciate so much you sharing your story. Can I ask, in terms of your TikTok and or if YouTube, if you're going to get back to it, like what do you feel like is your vibe, and what can people expect if they see your content, both stuff you've created in the past and stuff you'll maybe get to in the future? Like what is your goal with I was gonna say your ministry, not your ministry, but your building
Mhm.
building up of the new community. What's your goal? And sort of, if you have any final words for us to wrap us up.
I'd say my goal is to show people how fulfilling and beautiful life can be without having to dispense with rationality and believe the unbelievable. You know, I'd say that's what it is.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'll definitely encourage everyone again to like and subscribe to your channels. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up? Anything I didn't ask you about you wanted to add?
No, not really. I think we've really covered it in depth. Yeah,
Awesome, awesome. Well, I'll just
yeah.
say again, we've been speaking with Riley. Riley, it is an absolute honor and a privilege to speak with you. I'm so glad our paths crossed. I love your story. I appreciate your kind of clarifying all my questions for me there as to the differences between what I went through and what JWs go through. I'm so glad. Of course, the big picture that you escaped. I'm so glad that you got out, and you've been able to become so strong in your new life. I really do hope that you will consider, re-energizing your YouTube channel. We need voices in this so badly. So I think you would do great at that. So my encouragement is, when the time's right for you and your family, jump back in, and I would love to, when you do decide it is time to be more active on YouTube, let me know, and I'll have you back on, and we'll plug your channel even more again. But thank you for today. It's great to get to know you. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Likewise. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I'm honored.
Absolutely. Let's do it again sometime. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
Thank you. And you.
Bye-bye.